If you cure me, I'll adopt you, the millionaire challenged her. The words slipped from Alexander Pierce's mouth like a dare, a cruel joke, a wall he never expected anyone, least of all a little girl, to climb. Alexander Pierce was not an ordinary man. His name wasn't just on buildings, it was etched into the skyline of the city itself. He had risen from nothing, a boy with empty pockets but eyes full of fire, until the world bent under his will. His empire stretched from steel and glass towers to luxury hotels where billionaires toasted his success. He had lived a life of control. Control over markets, control over deals, control over people. But control shattered on a rain-slicked night. It was supposed to be a quick drive home, just another late meeting, another call taken behind the wheel. Then screeching tires, headlights blinding, the violent crush of metal, glass exploding like stars, and silence. When Alexander opened his eyes again, days had been stolen from him. White walls, sterile air, a ceiling that was not his own, and the hollow dread of not being able to move the way he once could. At first, the doctors gave him hope, wrapping their uncertainty in gentle words. "We'll see, we'll monitor, let's wait for the swelling to go down." But hope is a cruel guest. It never stays. Weeks became months, tests became disappointments, until finally, in a consultation room drenched in fluorescent light, the truth was dropped on him like a stone. The nerve damage is permanent. You will not walk again. Alexander left the hospital not as a man, but as a shadow. His wheelchair became his prison. His penthouse, once a temple of triumph, turned into a tomb. Friends stopped calling, or maybe he just stopped answering. Invitations piled up, unanswered. He watched the world from windows, but no longer stepped into it. Money meant nothing. Influence meant nothing. The skyscraper of his life had crumbled from within. One gray afternoon, he rolled himself into the city park. Not for joy. He no longer remembered what joy felt like, but to escape the suffocating silence of four walls. The air was cool. Leaves whispered overhead. For a fleeting moment, he almost felt human. Then, his phone slipped from his lap, clattering to the pavement just out of reach. He cursed softly, leaning forward, but if he reached any farther, the chair might tip. Anger boiled in his chest, sharp and familiar. That's when she appeared. A girl. No more than 7, bronze skin, hair braided neatly, a faded beige t-shirt tucked into a woman blue overall dress, scuffed knees, frayed sneakers. She bent down, picked up the phone, and without a word, handed it to him. "Thanks, kid," Alexander muttered. But the girl didn't leave. She stood there, studying him, really studying him. "Why are you in that chair?" she asked at last. Her voice was small, but not timid. Alexander blinked. Adults avoided the question, spoke around it, softened it with pity. But children had no such filter. "Because I can't walk," he said flatly. "And I never will." "Who says?" "Doctors," he snapped before he could stop himself. "People who actually know what they're talking about." The girl tilted her head, eyes narrowing as though weighing his soul. "You believe them?" The question cut deeper than it should have. He had been told 1,000 times to stay positive. He had heard every false cheer, every sugar-coated phrase. But this wasn't that. This was a challenge. Something in her gaze reminded him of himself, the boy he used to be, the one who never accepted no as an answer. And before he realized what he was saying, Alexander leaned forward in his chair, his voice carrying the sharp edge of arrogance he once wielded in boardrooms. "If you cure me, I'll adopt you." A ridiculous challenge, a dare dripping with the certainty that she couldn't possibly do it. But the girl didn't laugh, didn't flinch, didn't walk away. "Okay," she said simply, like he'd just asked her to bring him a glass of water. For the first time in a long time, Alexander Pierce felt caught off guard. No petty, no rolling of the eyes, just steady, unwavering certainty. "What's your name?" "Amara." "Alexander." She gave a tiny nod, glanced at his legs, then lifted her chin. "Tomorrow, same place." And just like that, she turned and walked away. Her small shoulders squared, her steps firm, as though she were marching into battle. Alexander sat frozen, watching her go. He told himself to forget it, to write her off as just another child with wild imagination. But that night, in the lonely glow of his penthouse overlooking the city, he replayed the moment, the absurdity of his promise, the fire in her eyes, and the dangerous, unwelcome thought that maybe, just maybe, this was not a child he should underestimate. For the first time in a very long time, Alexander Pierce felt something stir inside him. Not hope, not yet, but something close. The next morning, Alexander told himself not to expect anything. He wheeled into the park out of habit, the same way a prisoner paces his cell. The air was cool, sunlight dappled through the trees, and for once, he didn't feel like the richest man in the city. He just felt like a man who had lost everything. And then, there she was. Amara. Her braids were the same, but this time her arms were full. A plastic shopping bag dangled from her wrist, its cheap handle stretched from the weight. She marched toward him like a soldier reporting for duty. "You came back," Alexander said dryly. "Of course I did," she replied matter-of-factly, setting the bag down with a small thud. From it, she pulled out 3 worn resistance bands, their colors faded with age, and a small stack of photocopied papers. She laid them neatly on the park bench beside him. "What's all this?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "Your exercises," she answered. "I went to the library." Alexander almost laughed. He, who had hired the best therapists money could buy, was now being treated by a little girl with thrift store equipment and printouts. "Kid, you have no idea what you're doing. I've seen the top doctors in the city. I've tried everything." Amara crossed her arms, her chin lifting defiantly. "Then you didn't try with me." Her certainty was disarming. Irritation prickled at him, but something else, something dangerously close to curiosity, kept him from dismissing her. "Fine," he said, at last, his tone mocking. "Show me what you've got, coach." Without missing a beat, Amara looped a resistance band around his forearms. "We start here. Stronger arms mean you can lift yourself better. Stronger arms help your back. A strong back means a strong core. And if your core is strong—" She paused, meeting her eyes with unwavering determination. "Your legs might remember how to listen." Alexander wanted to argue, wanted to shut her down with cold logic. But before he could, Amara barked an order like a drill sergeant. 10 reps, now." He hesitated. "I said now." And against all reason, Alexander obeyed. The first pull was harder than he expected. His muscles trembled with the effort. By the 5th rep, sweat beaded on his forehead. Amara stood firm beside him, counting aloud, correcting his form with the precision of someone far older than 7 years. When he slacked on the 7th, she frowned. "Do it again, no cheating." He blinked at her, incredulous. "Do you know who I am?" Yeah, a man who made a promise. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Alexander let out a dry laugh and started again. This time, he didn't stop until she was satisfied. By the time she finally allowed him to rest, his arms ached. He had faced hostile takeovers, lawsuits, and billion-dollar negotiations, but somehow, this tiny girl with scuffed knees was the fiercest opponent he'd met in years. And she kept coming back. Every afternoon after school, Amara appeared in the park with her bag of supplies. Saturdays, she stayed longer, teaching him awkward yoga poses she'd copied from library books, pushing him to stretch, to sweat, to fight. At first, Alexander humored her, rolling his eyes, pretending he didn't care. But day by day, something began to shift. His arms grew stronger, his posture straighter. The dull ache in his back eased just enough for him to notice. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Alexander sat catching his breath. The sun was dipping low, painting the park in gold. Amara packed away her things, humming under her breath. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. She looked up, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she shrugged, as though the answer was the simplest thing in the world. "Because you said you would adopt me." The words hit him harder than any exercise ever could. That night, back in his penthouse, Alexander stared at the ceiling, Amara's voice echoing in his head. He had made the promise as a joke, a challenge no one could ever meet. But to her, it wasn't a game. It was real. And for the first time in months, Alexander Pierce didn't feel like a man waiting to die. He felt like a man about to be tested.
Weeks passed. By now, Alexander's afternoons had a rhythm. Amara, arriving at the park with her plastic bag of equipment, barking orders like a miniature drill sergeant, and leaving only when he was too sore to argue. The strangest thing wasn't the pain. It was the silence in his chest where despair used to live. He still didn't believe he'd walk again, but he was beginning to believe in her. One Saturday afternoon, Amara showed up with a mischievous spark in her eyes. "Today, we're not staying here," she announced. Alexander arched a brow. "Excuse me? I don't do field trips." "Yes, you do," she replied, already moving behind his chair to push. "Alexander, stop complaining. You promised, remember?" And that was how Alexander Pierce, billionaire recluse, found himself being wheeled down unfamiliar sidewalks by a 7-year-old. She navigated with surprising confidence until they stopped in front of an old brick building with faded paint, the East Side Community Center. The hum of basketballs echoed from the gym inside. The smell of chalk, sweat, and something fried drifted through the halls. Alexander wrinkled his nose. "What exactly are we doing here?" "You're meeting someone. He can help." Before Alexander could argue, she pushed him into a room lined with padded mats, resistance machines, and parallel bars. Waiting inside was a man in his 60s, broad-shouldered, hair silver but eyes sharp. "Mr. Pierce," the man said warmly, extending a hand. "I'm Coach Rivera." Alexander shook it cautiously. "Who exactly are you?" "Once upon a time, I was a physiotherapist. These days, I volunteer with adaptive athletes. Amara here wouldn't stop talking about you, said you needed someone who wouldn't baby you." Alexander shot Amara a look. She just smirked, folding her arms like a lawyer who had just won a case. Rivera crouched beside his chair, studying his posture with a practiced eye. "You've still got strength in your core. That's good. Your legs might not be dead. They might just be asleep." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Every doctor I've seen says otherwise." Rivera chuckled softly. "Doctors heal with science. Athletes heal with wars. You need both." Something about the man's tone, The mixture of kindness and steel reminded Alexander of his old mentors in business, the people who never let him take shortcuts. "Fine," he muttered. "Show me this war of yours." Rivera's methods were unlike anything Alexander had seen. No false promises, no pity, just sweat, repetition, and grueling precision. He strapped Alexander into harnesses attached to parallel bars, forcing his muscles into tiny micro-movements. He placed electrodes on dormant muscles, jolting them awake with electrical pulses. He made him push, pull, hold, until Alexander's body trembled with exhaustion. Every instinct screamed at Alexander to quit. But then, from the sidelines, Amara's small voice cut through his weakness. "Come on, Alex, one more rep. You've done harder things." He gritted his teeth. She was right. He had clawed his way up from nothing once. Why not again? By the end of the first session, he was drenched in sweat, his hands trembling, his chest heaving. Rivera clapped him on the shoulder. "Not bad for day one. You've got fight left in you. That's all we need." Alexander slumped in his chair, too tired to respond. But as he glanced at Amara, he saw pride blazing in her eyes. The kind of pride no deal, no skyscraper, no stock market victory had ever given him. From that day on, the park wasn't enough. The community center became his battlefield. Rivera pushed him harder each week, while Amara stood by like his shadow, her little voice always there at the exact moment he thought he couldn't go on. The man who once measured life in profits now measured it in centimeters of movement, in the faintest twitch of a toe, in the ghost of sensation returning to his calves. And every time progress came, no matter how small, Amara would grin and whisper, "See? They're listening." For the first time since the accident, Alexander found himself looking forward, not back.
For days, Elena kept replaying Isaac's words in her mind. "I'll do it. I'll be her donor." It felt too big, too generous, too unreal. But it was real. Tests confirmed he was a perfect match. The hospital staff moved quickly, preparing everything for the transplant. The morning of the surgery arrived heavy with silence. Elena stood in the hospital corridor, clutching her daughter's favorite pink scarf like it was her lifeline. She watched through the glass as doctors wheeled Isaac away on a stretcher. His eyes met hers for a brief second, and he managed a tired smile, as if to say, "Don't worry, I promised her I'd be here." Inside the waiting room, Elena sat with her head bowed, tears running silently down her face. Every second dragged like an hour. She thought of Lariah, her little girl who never stopped believing in happy endings, and of Isaac, who had walked into their lives by chance and now was risking everything for them. Finally, after what felt like forever, the doors swung open. The surgeon approached, his mask pulled down, his eyes soft with relief. "The surgery was a success," he said. "Both Isaac and Lariah are stable." Elena's knees gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair, sobbing with gratitude. She whispered over and over, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Hours later, she stood by Isaac's bedside. He was pale, weak, but alive. When he opened his eyes and saw her, his first words were barely a whisper. "Is she okay?" Elena smiled through her tears. "She's more than okay. Because of you, she has a future." Isaac's lips curved into a faint smile before he drifted back to sleep. Elena reached for his hand and held it gently, realizing in that moment that he had given them more than a kidney. He had given them hope, a second chance, a miracle. From parallel bars, he moved to crutches, from crutches to careful steps. Every milestone felt impossible until it was behind him. Nearly a year after they met, on a quiet evening in the same park where it began,
Alexander took his first unassisted step. Amara was there, clapping through her tears, the sound echoing like a small victory parade. And true to his word, Alexander began the adoption process. This wasn't charity, it was acknowledgement. Amara hadn't just given him back his legs, she had given him back his life, his purpose, his reason to believe again. On the day the papers were finalized, Amara's battered notebook sat proudly on her new bedroom desk. On the last page, under Fix It Ideas, she had written in her looping, hopeful handwriting, "Alex's legs fixed." A dream that once seemed too big for her small hands had become reality. That night, Alexander stood in her doorway, leaning lightly on his cane, watching as she arranged her books like any other 13-year-old girl. His voice broke the quiet. "You didn't just help me walk again. You gave me my life back." Amara looked over her shoulder, her smile calm, knowing, almost older than her years. "And you gave me mine." From that day forward, neither of them believed in never anymore. For in each other, they had found the proof that broken things, legs, hearts, or lives, could be mended not with miracles, but with love, courage, and the promise of family.